that last week of Jesus' life. Oh, so by the way, tonight we're going to talk about this. Next week, I think the topic is what Jesus actually accomplished on the cross. And then we're done. I think we're done for Wednesday night Bible studies and for March, because we got spring break and Holy Week. But we will pick back up in April, but not on Wednesday nights. We're going to do our Wednesday night stuff starting in April on Sunday nights. So we'll have a Sunday night meal, we'll have children, we'll have youth, and we'll have adult stuff on Sunday nights. And I also think that will include children's handbells and choir practice for the children on Sunday night. So we'll do everything that we do on Wednesday on Sundays in April. So we come to the last week of Jesus' life. And the Gospels are interesting because every Gospel does not contain everything. So when we read, the story of Jesus, for instance, when we take the record of the birth of Jesus, the genealogies, how Jesus is related and goes back to David and actually goes back to Adam. The genealogies are only found in Matthew and Luke. The birth narratives, as they would appear in a historical setting, are only found in Matthew and Luke, and only Luke gives you great detail. Mark has nothing of it. Mark picks up where the action is, Jesus' ministry. John gives us a birth narrative, no genealogy, but it's interesting, just to point this out to you, that there is a difference in, here we go, what did I throw that? Oh, I dropped all those. No, I think we put those there on that later. So, there's two different words that we will say at Christmas. One is the nativity. The other is the incarnation. Nativity means incarnation means enfleshment. Matthew, and so this is more biographical or historical. This is more theological. Matthew and Luke give us biology and history. They give us this baby was born to this virgin in this place at this time, surrounded by these people, and et cetera, and this is why they're there. But if you remember, John talks, he opens the gospel up with the narrative of the birth, but it's not a historical thing, it's not a biological thing. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, etc. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. So John doesn't even refer to Jesus in an earthly, biological, historical sense. He refers to Jesus as the Word, or Logos, which is a purely theological thing. We're talking about the same person, but it's purely theological. So Matthew and Luke tell the story from a biological, historical perspective. Mark doesn't tell that part of the story at all. John tells it, but from a theological, and some even will say mysterious, not in the sense that it's something we don't understand, but that it's shrouded in mystery. It's beyond our knowing, beyond our understanding. So, just gave you that just so that we can begin to understand. I'll leave that for now. Just so we can understand that why you see gaps here is because not every gospel contains everything. Some contain small pieces, some contain large pieces, some contain no pieces. By the time we get here, though, John actually merges into the way Matthew, Mark, and Luke tell it, because John becomes more historical, more biographical. However, he still has this air of theology and mystery, and we'll see some of this. So, on Friday, Saturday, Jesus arrives in Bethany. Mary anoints Jesus. Crowds come to see Jesus. And then we come to what we call the triumphal entry, or Palm Sunday. I think I'm missing something. Oh, there it is. So we come to Palm Sunday, and let's go to Matthew's version of Palm Sunday. If you have a Bible, if you don't, it's okay. I'm gonna read it to you anyway. Go to Matthew, because there are certain things. We're not going to cover everything in here, but there are certain things that I do want to point out to you. You'll probably hear some of these things when I preach. Although, you know what? I'm not really preaching on Palm Sunday, so you won't hear it this year. Matthew chapter 21. 1 through 11. Now, when they drew near to Jerusalem and came to Bethphage, to the Mount of Olives, Jesus sent 2 disciples, saying to them, "Go into the village in front of you, and immediately you'll find a donkey tied and a colt with her. Untie them, bring them to me. If anyone says anything to you, you shall say the Lord needs them, and he will send them at once." This took place to fulfill what was spoken by the prophet, saying, "Say to the daughter of Zion, behold, your king is coming to you, humble and mounted on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of the beast of burden." Disciples went and did as Jesus had directed them. They brought the donkey and the colt and put on them their cloaks, and he sat on them. Most of the crowd spread their cloaks on the road, and others cut branches from the trees and spread them on the road. And the crowds that went before him and that followed him were shouting, "Hosanna to the Son of David. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest." And when he entered Jerusalem, the whole city was stirred up, saying, "Who is this?" And the crowd said, "This is the prophet Jesus from Nazareth of Galilee." So what I want to basically point out to you in this passage is 2 things I think that are really really important. First of all, that when Jesus came in, they were waving palm branches, and they cut them, and some were waving them, and some threw them in the path. This was a sign that was well known in Jesus' day. That was a tradition. Anybody watch hockey or know anything about the NHL? I've made already one in it, just off the top of my head, an NHL reference, and this just came to my mind. The Detroit Red Wings. Y'all know the tradition when the Red Wings score? Does anybody know? Mark knows. when the Red Wings score, it used to be a tradition to throw an octopus on the ice. I used to know why. I don't know why anymore. But I think it's a fantastic tradition. I mean, if you got an octopus, why not? Throw it out there. It's not every day that, I mean, I don't go to a ball game and just carry an octopus in my pocket. But if I do, I'll go throw it. And I just love it. I kind of like hockey anyway because it's almost as good as professional wrestling. And these people mean it. But any place that throws an octopus on the court, on the ice, is great with me. But it's a tradition when they score. In Jesus' day, it was a tradition for conquering heroes to get a palm parade, kind of like used to be a long time ago. They'd send people like Lindbergh and MacArthur and all these people into New York, Mickey Mantle and others, in a ticker tape parade, right? And that was kind of the way it was. In this day, it was a sign of victory. It was to hail a conquering hero. They waved palm branches, say if Caesar's generals came back after an expedition and had won a battle or something, they would be greeted with palms of victory waving there. This is a tale, T-E-L-L, on what the people thought of Jesus. And it's often, striking, I think, for people to think, well, golly, on Sunday, these people were saying, hey, Jesus, you the man. And on Friday, they were saying, crucify him, crucify him. However, there's two parts of this. On the one hand, they were misunderstanding Jesus as the disciples misunderstood Jesus, but this was even greater. They saw Jesus as the Messiah who was going to be the military Messiah, the conquering hero. In some sense, the second coming of Christ is what they were looking for back then. They didn't. Obviously, that's not what they were looking for. But what I mean to say is, if you were here, or if you've read the Bible, and you know what it's going to be like when Christ comes again, He will come in power and glory with all the angels with Him and the heavenly armies, and He will defeat everything at this point. That's what they were thinking was going to happen then when this Messiah came. They were obviously dead wrong. So they were giving Him a hero's welcome for a victory that they were thinking was just a few days ahead. And to cap this off, the other hand, is they were shouting Hosanna, which is not a shout of acclamation at all. We have sort of come to think of it this way, and I don't think this is one time. You'll almost never hear me complain about hymns, because I love hymns. Hymns teach great theology, except in the case of one of our Palm Sunday hymns, Hosanna, Hosanna, the little children sang. Makes it sound like all the little children saying, hey, Jesus, you the man, you the man, you the man. That's not what Hosanna means. Hosanna means save us, help us, please, Lord, help us now, immediately, don't wait. It has nothing to do with rah, 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 sis, boom, bah. It's, we're in trouble, we need you to help us now. So see, these people were on the edge, welcoming the hero. Hosanna is a plea, it's a cry, it's begging. It's not a cheer at all. So now you see why it's so easy for them to turn on Him when he's standing there silently before Pilate on Friday morning. They're ticked off. He has completely, they wasted the good octopus for nothing. You know, perfectly good octopus threw out on the court, and they got the gold taken back. So, you know, they cut all those branches down, they got all their clothes dirty, throwing their cloaks on the ground, and, you know, in their mind, they picked the wrong horse. A lot of different analogies in there, forgive me. But anyway, they were so angry. But what I want you to get is the fact that they missed it. The palm branches indicate they missed it because they misunderstood who the Messiah was and what he came to do. The cries of Hosanna, while they were real, they were not spiritual cries for help. They were temporal or worldly, earthly cries for help. They didn't care anything about being delivered from sin and death and hell and the devil. They wanted a Jewish kingdom free from Caesar. That's what they wanted. That's it. So, now you are better able to understand what comes next. In Luke chapter 19, let me read verse 41. And when Jesus drew near and saw the city, he wept over it, saying, "Would that you, even you, had known on this day the things that make for peace, but now they're hidden from your eyes. For the days will come upon you when your enemies will set up a barricade around you and surround you and hem you in on every side and tear you down to the ground, you and your children within you. And they will not leave one stone upon another in you, because you did not know the time of your visitation." Jesus weeps over Jerusalem because they just don't get it. And it's too late. They know, he knows that they're all there for the wrong reason. And they won't turn. And, you know, that has to be, and I think it's hard for us to think about, because we like to think that there's always time. We've got plenty of time to turn around. And we might think, those people in Jerusalem that day may have thought they had plenty of time, but the Lord knows you don't. Not only do you not have plenty of time, he knows who is and who is not. And it's so sad to think that this is an entire city of Jerusalem going to hell at one time. That's kind of blunt, but there is no other way to express it so that you don't miss the point. Jesus is not weeping over Jerusalem, you know, because they didn't throw enough octopi on the ice. He's not weeping because they got, you know, sycamore leaves and branches and not palm branches. He's not weeping, you know, for their ignorance that they'll ultimately come to truth. What he's weeping for is that they had the opportunity, they missed it, and you know, they won't get it back. It's over. They're still alive, but it'll be too late. They missed it. And that's just an eye-opening passage. Let's go to Monday. And let's go let's go to Mark now. Mark chapter 11. In verse 12. On the following day, when they came to Bethany, he was hungry, and seeing in the distance a fig tree in leaf, he went to see if he could find anything on it. When he came to it, he found nothing but leaves, for it was not the season for figs. And he said to it, "May no one ever eat fruit from you again." The disciples heard it. You know, this is one of those, what did the fig tree do to Jesus kind of thing? Well, obviously, he was not cursing all fig trees, for which I'm immensely thankful, because I love figs. It was just this particular one, because it was, springtime in Jerusalem. And, we see this a lot, particularly around here, and it's the bane of existence from Hendersonville all the way down to Edgefield, and that is when the peach trees and the apple trees bud and blossom too soon. Then there's always that late frost that's going to kill them and wipe out the peaches and wipe out the apples, and we all going to be paying 5 times more for peaches and apples than we wanted. So this is one of those things. This is an early spring kind of deal. The fig tree buds out. Fig trees, biologically, they don't blossom. We're actually eating the flower. The fig is actually a flower, so you're not eating it yet. So they don't actually, anyway. So the fig tree's got plenty of leaves on it. And Jesus is hungry. Again, this points out, this reminds us that Jesus was very God, but also very man. Truly God and truly human. And again, I want to remind you, I know I say this all the time, but I just want to make sure that if a meteor hits me on the head and squishes me tonight, at least I want you to know what those 2 daggum candles on the altar are for. The humanity of Jesus and the divinity of Jesus. They have nothing to do with symmetry or feng shui or any other kind of thing. They have to do with the humanity of Jesus and the divinity of Jesus. So, Jesus was truly God and was truly human. So, he's hungry. And he goes to the fig tree because, hey, look, this, it's like McDonald's is open. And he goes to the fig tree and he looks and there's no figs. And so he curses the fig tree. What is the point of this? Well, I'll tell you. We are just about to jump headlong into another story that really spells it out again. But if there's one thing that Jesus was dead set against, it was fake religion and fake religious people, i.e. hypocrites. This fig tree is an analogy for a hypocrite. It presented itself to be something that it wasn't, to possess something that it didn't have. It, in other words, was a puffed up religious person who claimed to know God but didn't, who claimed to have Christ in them or claimed to have salvation, holiness, whatever, and had none of it. It was all pretense. It was, I look the part, but I don't act the part. I dress up like a religious person, but there's nothing in me that gives you any indication by what I say, what I do, how I live, anything that I really am. So the curse is not so much for that poor little bush. The curse is Jesus' condemnation of hypocrisy. That makes sense? It's a deep hole if you really want to get in it, but it's an important one because you go through the Gospels and time again. Go through the Old Testament. What is a hypocrite? Obviously, a hypocrite is an actor, somebody who's playing a part. That is the Greek definition of the word hypocrite. Somebody who is an actor, playing a part. But in the church, what is the danger of a hypocrite? Anybody?
It's a poor witness.
It's a poor witness. A little further. What else?
False prophet.
A false prophet. A hypocrite is a false teacher, a false prophet, and they give a false witness. Because what they're doing is saying, I am exactly what you should be. Look at me. You know, whatever that might be. Listen to me. I'll tell you whatever. I think I've told you the story of Leroy Jenkins, the famed evangelist, faith healer, who was, boy, was he a mess. You ought to look up Brother Leroy on YouTube. He's dead now. I don't think he passed a bottle of shoe polish that he didn't put on his hair. I tell you, his head looked like a black hole. It just absorbed light. It was so black because it was so dyed. But he lived in Greenwood for a while. I don't know why. But he lived in Greenwood for a while. And famously, there was a bar in Greenwood, and he was in it one night, and he was pretty well in the spirits, let's say, with an S. And somebody said, aren't you the preacher at the tent meeting out there? And he said, yeah. And he said, why are you here drinking? And he said, well, brother, I tell you, he said, I prayed and the Lord has taken the alcohol out of all of what I've been drinking. But the thing was, he was serious. It's obvious that it didn't work, that's a false prophet. If you go back in the Old Testament, read the book of Ezekiel, read others, that the false prophets are just condemned. And this is why I say people really don't need to teach, deep at Sunday school and Bible study and things like that, teaching up here on the really surface level is fine, but don't go deeper than you really know what you're talking about. It's like Bill Gaither once said, if I keep talking, I'll tell you more than I know. And I think that's what happens. And when you start into that, you get into false teaching at that. If you don't know your limit, but the witness, everything that you're given is false. So Jesus is saying, hypocrite, it's not just about you. All these people who follow you, who look at you, who listen to you, who watch you and all this, you're dragging them to hell with you. So it's the danger. Hypocrisy is not just a personal, small thing. Hypocrisy is a big, big deal. And this is why Jesus didn't like it and cursed it. So let's go. Let's just move, like I said, let's move one verse down. Let's stay in Mark. And they came to Jerusalem, and he entered the temple and began to drive out those who sold and those who bought in the temple. And he overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold pigeons. He would not allow anyone to carry anything through the temple. And he was teaching them and saying to them, is it not written, my house shall be called a house of prayer for all the nations, but you have made it a den of thieves. So, here's what's going on. Hypocrites. So, I don't know how many times as a pastor have I been asked, or either asked in advance or chastised in the aftermath about selling something in the church. You know, Jesus took a whip to people that sold stuff in the church and all that. You know, I mean, we can't. There are some things that you can't sell in church, but this is not the moral of this story. So remember, we're talking about hypocrites. What you have here are people who basically are setting up these tables at the entrance of the temple. Now, what goes on in the temple? Sacrifices. Animal sacrifices. Now, here's the way animal sacrifices work. If you were well off, you could buy a lamb, or you would have a lamb to sacrifice. If you were poor, the best you could do was a pigeon, a dove. And so these people, they weren't in the business of lamb selling. They were selling pigeons. And so there's some, evidence that, by the way, the doves, the pigeons, had to be pure, just like the lambs did. And so, you got to imagine there probably wasn't a whole bunch, like just flocks and flocks of white doves, although they were there, obviously, and that's what they used. But every now and then you're going to have a dove that's got a gray feather or a black feather or a speckle here or something there. Well, what these people were doing was selling inferior, impure kind of doves. They were, take whatever, I don't know what they used, like, talcum powder or paint or something, and they would sprinkle it on those feathers so that nobody would know the difference. Or, it could have been that they would just catch a mourning dove, a gray dove, just paint the whole thing white. I don't know. That's the gist of what they were doing. It was deception. So you got deception, but it's deception by hypocrites, because they're pretending to have these people's best interests at heart. They're lying to people, deceiving the people. They're making money off of these poor people when they don't really care about their sacrifice. They don't care about taking their money. They don't care if the law said, I have to imagine that God didn't care, about the sacrifice. I know that the rules of Judaism were that the sacrificial animal had to be pure, but these people had been taken advantage of. I don't think, that was not something God was going to hold against them. He rather was going to hold it against these people. So again, we're talking about hypocrisy. These hypocrites pretending to be holy, pretending to be righteous, pretending to be people who have the best interest of these other folks at heart. They don't. None of that is true. So Jesus comes in, and in one of the Gospels he has a whip. And he takes the whip to them. And he turns the tables over. And he throws them out. And he tells everybody to get out. And he says, this is supposed to be a house of prayer, but you've made it a den of thieves. You're dishonest, you're fake, you're phony, you're hypocrites. Get out. And then, so here's another thought about that. People with the meek and mild Jesus, and the people who want to say that Jesus was a pacifist. There's a lot of things that Jesus said and did that would indicate to us that we need to be more like him in desiring for peace and working for peace and working for forgiveness. But don't be misled that Jesus never once told a Roman soldier that they should not carry a sword. His own disciples carried swords with them into the Garden of Gethsemane, and he never condemned the sword carrying. He condemned what Peter did out of anger. Not that he had a sword with him for protection, but rather that he condemned. And then there's this driving out, bless you, driving out of these hypocrites with a whip, and the fact that Jesus got angry. It is fine to be angry as long as your anger is based in righteousness. I think it is inhuman, not inhuman. It is unhuman. That's the better word. It is unhuman to expect us, to expect a Christian to see some egregious sin, particularly something that takes place to an innocent, that happens to an innocent, like the abuse of a child, and not get angry, not get upset, not want to, my mama used to say, wring somebody's neck, but probably even more than that, Jesus did it. It doesn't give us an excuse, but when to just go out and wantonly, be, violent or angry or something. But there is such a thing as righteous indignation or righteous anger, and it is okay. And don't let anybody ever tell you, because the Bible never says that. It says, the Bible says, be angry, but don't sin. So, you can flesh that out. We can talk about that another time. But, that doesn't mean just be angry and keep it to yourself. It said, because Jesus certainly didn't sin when he threw those tables over and whipped those people out of the temple. That was not sin. That was part of being righteous, righteously angry, and how to work that out. So we are allowed that. We just can't. We have to have such control that we can't cross over into sin. Let me see if I can. This is not going to work out to be a perfect example, but let me see if I can maybe give you an example. So let's say we leave here tonight and we see, somebody across the street, trying to kidnap a child over in the parking lot at Vaughn's or something, and just manhandling the child, beating the child, whatever, little child, the child screaming and everything. They're trying to get her. We run over there and we just, rescue the child and just give the guy what for, and just beat the dickens out of him or whatever. In the moment, even our law indicates that, there are such things as it might be a crime, but it's still a crime of passion. It's done out of, not always righteous indignation, but in this case it could be. I think that would be perfectly allowable. What would be crossing over into sin is if after everything was said and done and everybody was calmed down, we just walked around to the other side of the police car where the perpetrator is sitting, and just opened the door and drug him out, threw him in the back of the pickup truck and took him down to the river and beat him to death and threw him in the river, because we know what he was going to do with the child. That's where it crosses over. Do you follow that? It's almost like it's premeditated at this point. If you're acting in righteous indignation, to defend somebody or to help somebody, that's one thing. But you can't wait till it's all over and say, you know what, I'm going back after you. Just because I need to punish. Because then we cross over into vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. We can't. So there's a line. Anyway. Let's jump on down. I want to push through a couple of things. Judas betrays Jesus on Wednesday, on what's called Holy Wednesday. It's actually called, in older times, it was called Spy Wednesday, because Judas was like a spy. He knew what Jesus was going to do. He also knew what the Jewish leaders wanted him to do, and so he was like, maybe a double agent or something. And so that's when he got the money. And then we have by the way, I left something out on Palm Sunday that I meant to say. On the Sunday, excuse me, not the Sunday, but 6 days before the Passover, this was when the family selected the sacrificial lamb and brought the lamb home to be prepared for the sacrifice. So there's an interesting correlation between Jesus being, coming home to be sacrificed. He enters into the place of sacrifice 6 days before. Now, go back. The Last Supper on Thursday, we call it, Maundy Thursday. There's a lot going on. I wish I had time to go into it. There's a lot going on. We have the Lord's Supper, obviously the institution of the Lord's Supper, the rite of foot washing, which I'll just add my 2 cents to foot washing. I have never come to grips with what I know about how the sacraments were chosen. The Protestants, the Catholics and the Orthodox Christians have 7 sacraments. Only 2 of their 7 were directly instituted by Christ by command. And that was baptism, go therefore into all the world, baptize, and the Lord's Supper, Holy Communion. Do this as often as you do it in remembrance of me. So only 2 of the 7. Now, so the Protestants kept those 2, but it is unquestionable that Jesus gave a command to do a 3rd thing, and that was to wash feet. There are some Christian groups who hold, the Church of the Brethren being one, who hold that foot washing is a sacrament. I would absolutely side with them because Jesus commanded us to wash feet. And he couched it in the very reason we call Maundy Thursday, Maundy Thursday. The word Maundy comes from the word mandatum, which is where we get the word mandate. It is a mandate. It is a regulation. It is a requirement. It is a command. And Jesus says, a new mandate I give you, as soon as he washes feet, that you should love one another. This was a sign of love and humility of washing feet. It is an obvious command. So again, I won't go any further. I just think that foot washing, even though it's not a sacrament, if I were, patriarch of the church, I would say we should have added it. I didn't. So all I can say is that it's a very holy rite of the church, and it is a moving thing if you've ever been a part of one or ever seen one done. Leave it at that. On Friday is the Thursday night. Obviously, they go into the Garden of Gethsemane, and there's a lot going on there. Jesus is sweating blood. He prays that if it be possible, this cup pass from him. Peter and the rest of the disciples sleep, and then Peter also, when they come to arrest Jesus, he cuts off Malchus's ear, and Jesus picks it up and sticks it back on. And then they arrest Jesus, and they have a trial. The Jews try him, Ananias and Caiaphas, and the full Sanhedrin. And then there's the Roman trials, Pilate and Herod, and all that Pilate does. And then there's the crucifixion. This lasts from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Inside this story, you have Simon of Cyrene carrying the cross. The Jesus is insulted by the priests and by the crowd. There's the confession of the centurion, commendation of the Virgin Mary. There's the salvation of the thief. I want to talk about that in a minute. 7 last words: darkness, earthquake, temple curtain torn, tombs open, and Joseph of Arimathea takes his body. Then there's the burial. Let me take some of those quickly. Joseph of Arimathea. There is a legend or tradition of the church. Can't prove it, but you also can't disprove it. But the legend, tradition that Joseph of Arimathea was Mary's uncle, and so was thus Jesus' uncle. And there's all sorts of stories about Joseph of Arimathea was a tin trader, we know that, and he went to Britain a lot. And the legend of Glastonbury, you ought to look that up. Glastonbury, Glastonbury. There's a flower that grows there because that's where supposedly Jesus stepped. So the British truly believe that Jesus, as a child, went with his uncle to Britain. In fact, one of the hymns that is played at every English coronation is "Jerusalem, O Jerusalem." If you read the lyrics, it talks about the Holy Child walking on English soil and all of this. And so that whole divine right of kings and all this business is interesting in that. The salvation of the thief on the cross, Dismas, by tradition, is his name. Gestas, Gestas, is the bad thief who mocked Jesus. I will show you this. I used to wear, I just typically wear just one pectoral cross, this one cross around my neck because somebody gave it to me. But I had another one that I wore a lot, and it was an Eastern Orthodox cross. And you've seen the Orthodox cross. It looks like this, and then it has this line down at the bottom. Well, a lot of times it won't have this upper bar. I think mine was just like this. But so if you ever seen it, this is generally an Orthodox cross, and so this is a footrest. So the sign would have been up here, Jesus would have been, here, and his feet would have been here. But what's the significance of making this slanted? Story of thieves. There's all kinds of symbolism in the church if you take a minute to look. The thief on Jesus' right was Dismas. He was saved. He went up to heaven. Gestas mocked Jesus, and he was down, and he went down to hell. So if you look at an Orthodox cross, it tells the story of Good Friday right there. I love it. I have one in my office I was going to bring, and I forgot. Commendation of Mary. It was not until the 19th and 20th century that Protestants somehow started to think that Mary was not a virgin after Jesus was born. All of the reformers, Luther, Calvin, Zwingli, Simons, Cranmer, all of the reformers held that Mary was always a virgin. John Wesley and Charles Wesley wrote extensively, Mary was always a virgin. The evidence for Mary's virginity, despite the fact that there are passages in the Bible that says James was the brother of Jesus or something like that. James was the brother of Jesus. There is also a lot to be said for the fact that the use of the word brother and sister in that culture was not necessarily meant to always indicate that somebody was biologically related. But the best evidence for the virginity of Mary after the birth of Jesus is the fact that had James been the brother of Jesus, under Jewish law, James would have had to have cared for his mother. It was Jewish law. No way around it. Joseph was dead. So that's why we don't hear anything about Joseph much more after Jesus. Well, we don't hear anything about Jesus either from the time he was 12 and he snuck off from Joseph and Mary to the time he was baptized. So he's 30, so those intermittent years in there, between 12 and 30, Joseph dies. Jesus, grows up, but he obviously learns from Joseph and all of this. But when Jesus commends his mother to another disciple, the disciple, we know John is the disciple Jesus loved, when he says, "Woman, behold your son, behold, or John, behold your mother," or something like that. The commendation of Mary to John indicates that Jesus would not have broken Jewish law at the last moment. So there is just, that evidence alone is evidence that Mary was a virgin. I want to just quickly say, as briefly as I can, something about the moment of Jesus' death. So there were a couple of things that happened. First, the Bible tells us that there was darkness over the face of the earth. Darkness covered everything. And in this moment, the sky grew dark and the whole thing. Darkness is a symbol of God's judgment. So this is God's judgment. What's it God's judgment on? It's God's judgment on sin. Whose sin? Our sin. But what does that mean? Well, Jesus took on our sin, and the fact that he died was God's judgment. It should have been ours, but it fell on him. So there was judgment. The next thing that happened was that the curtain of the temple was torn in two. The temple curtain was, when Solomon made it, it was like 40 feet high. It was a big old thing. Herod added 20 feet to it, somewhere in that neighborhood. So by this time it was 60 feet high. The Talmud says that it was 4 inches thick. It was made of woven, sewn purple and red and black cloth. I'm coming. I got 2 more things to say. So the temple separated people from the Holy of Holies. Only the priest could go in the Holy of Holies. Interestingly enough, I don't know how many of you ever known this, ever realized this, but the church is still set up that way. Let me see what's the best way to draw it. So you're looking at me. So here's the lectern, here's the pulpit, here's the altar. What do you have around here? An altar rail. You have a separation. And in the olden days, nobody but the elder was supposed to go back here. That's why you had boxed choirs on the side, because you weren't supposed to go back here. I think that was a bit much. However, in the Orthodox tradition, and Catholics don't hold to this anymore. I've been allowed to go up in the chancel area and the altar area, but among the Orthodox, you still don't do it. In fact, the Orthodox are so peculiar about this that a Greek Orthodox priest would not be allowed to go into the altar area up here at a Coptic Orthodox church. Or a Russian Orthodox priest, like St. John of the Ladder in town, would not be able to go into a Greek, like St. George, wouldn't be allowed to go in their altar area. It's kind of silly in a sense, but the point is that this is the holy place, and that the priest or the elder was the one who went to the altar, and the people couldn't do it, and there was no. Now, for us, it's a little bit. For Christians, it was a little different because we'd still come here, and they'd come here. We'd come here with communion. You'd come here, and you'd still do all that. I don't want to get too much into that symbolism, but in Judaism, there was nothing that anybody but the high priest could do. They were the only mediator between you and God. There was nothing. You couldn't go into the holy spot. You had to trust everything he said or did or whatever. There was nothing. The significance of the temple veil, that big old piece of cloth being torn in two and thrown down, indicated now nothing separates us from God. And even in the Christian church, we didn't even with our architecture, we didn't disagree with that, because all Christians believe in the priesthood of all believers, which by definition simply means you don't need anybody else to go to God on your behalf. You can do that. I in fact don't rely on me to go to God on your behalf. I'll pray for you, but it's like that old Tom T. Hall song, "Me and Jesus got our own thing going." You got to do it with Jesus yourself. And then the last thing that happened was the earthquake, the connection in the with the earthquake was that the earthquakes always indicated that a supernatural event had happened or was about to happen, something spectacular. And in this case, it was both. Forgiveness and salvation had been made possible. Access to God had been made possible with the rending of the temple veil. And then the graves opened up and the dead people came out. And this is, hello. And this is, symbolic, both symbolic of the resurrection, but also an indication that Jesus' death not only covers us, hey sweet baby, but it also covers everybody who lives before him. Does that mean that everybody who lived before him was saved? No. Only those who believed the promise of the Messiah to come. So like Abraham trusted that there would be a deliverer, all of those who had faith that the promises of God would come true, that a Messiah would come, they were raised, to life. And those in the future did. So, you want to say the prayer at the end? No, okay. All right. Well, that's it. I wish I had more time, but at least you got a good list of stuff you can read and go from there. And Emma Grace had yogurt at school today, and I declare she got more on her